For generations, we've believed the frontier was ruled by gunfire. Heroes, outlaws, and six-shooters blazing across endless plains. But peel back the legend, and the truth is almost unbelievable. Number 11. The Colt Peacemaker won the West single-handedly. In the smoking aftermath of countless silver screen gunfights, one weapon stands alone as the architect of American expansion, Samuel Colt's 1873 masterpiece, the Peacemaker, 6 chambers, 45 caliber Thunder, the gun that won the West. That phrase wasn't even invented until the 20th century, decades after the frontier had closed. It was a retrospective fantasy, a nostalgia campaign designed to sell weapons to a generation that had never fired a shot in anger. Here's what the marketing departments at Colt didn't tell you. No single firearm won the West. What conquered the frontier wasn't the Peacemaker in a lawman's holster. It was the railroad spike driven by Chinese laborers, the plow blade turned by homesteaders, the sheer bloody-minded determination of families who crossed an ocean and a continent with little more than hope. And if you're keeping score, the Winchester repeating rifle actually earned the gun that won the West title first. More practical, more reliable, more lethal at range. The Peacemaker became America's most romantic firearm, not because it was the deadliest, but because it photographed well and fit perfectly into the mythology a young nation desperately wanted to believe about itself. But if one gun's legend was built on marketing, the next myth was built on something even more dangerous: physics that don't exist. Number 10. Revolvers could drop someone with one shot. You squeeze the trigger, the .45 Colt roars. Your target drops like a puppet with cut strings. That's the movie version. Reality wrote a different script, one soaked in blood and desperation. The Frontier revolver was supposedly a death ray in your hand. One bullet, anywhere on the body, and your opponent was finished. The .45 Colt especially, they called it a man-stopper and a horse killer because it supposedly possessed mythical stopping power that could end a fight with surgical precision. Here's the cold mathematics of gunshot wounds. The human body is devastatingly resilient. Unless you sever the spinal cord or catastrophically damage the brain, a person can continue fighting for minutes, sometimes hours. Headshots resulted in 75% immediate incapacitation. Torso shots, only 41%. Arms and legs, a mere 14%. The documented evidence is chilling. One shootout saw a man absorb 338 special rounds before he even returned fire. His opponent took 2 .45 ACP hits and fled, with police following his blood trail for 8 hours before finding him alive in a closet. Both men survived to see trial. Jesse James himself carried a .36 caliber ball embedded in his torso for over 15 years. It never killed him. The myth of one shot stops sold guns and movie tickets, but it got real gunfighters killed. The ones who survived learned a brutal lesson. Shot placement matters infinitely more than caliber, and the only guaranteed stop is the one that interrupts the central nervous system. But perhaps the biggest lie wasn't about the guns themselves. It was about who was allowed to carry them. If these myths are already blowing your mind, there's more where that came from. Hit subscribe and stick around. We uncover the forgotten truths behind the legends. The West wasn't what it seemed, and neither is history. Number 9. Everyone carried guns everywhere in Wild West towns. The Wild West was supposedly an armed society. Polite because everyone knew everyone else was packing heat. Cowboys, merchants, gamblers all walked the streets fully armed, creating a libertarian paradise where the Second Amendment reigned supreme and government interference was non-existent. Welcome to actual Dodge City, where a massive sign dominated the town square. The carrying of firearms, strictly prohibited. Not suggested, not discouraged, prohibited. When you entered a frontier town, you faced a choice. Check your weapons with the marshal or leave them at home. These weren't requests, they were laws, enforced by men like Wyatt Earp, with billy clubs and iron resolve. Tombstone, that legendary symbol of Western lawlessness, had stricter gun control than most modern American cities. The famous gunfight at the OK Corral started because the Clanton gang refused to surrender their weapons as required by law. Earp wasn't defending freedom, he was enforcing gun control ordinances. Newspapers from the 1880s are filled with editorials demanding even stricter regulations. Cattle associations banned cowboys from wearing six-shooters entirely, recognizing that armed drunks and volatile tempers created graveyards, not security. The myth of the armed frontier serves modern political narratives on both sides, but history tells a different story. The people who actually lived in the Wild West wanted gun control desperately because they understood something Hollywood forgot. More guns didn't mean more safety, but even when guns were legal to carry, hitting your target was another matter entirely. Number 8. Revolvers were accurate at long distances. You draw your Peacemaker, line up the sights on a target 100 yards away and squeeze. In the movies, the target drops. In reality, you've just wasted a bullet. The legendary gunfighters of the West could supposedly thread needles at impossible distances. Wild Bill Hickok splitting playing cards at 50 paces. Cowboys picking off bandits from 100 yards with their trusty six-shooters. Precision was their trademark, accuracy their religion. Here's what the Army's own testing revealed. At 50 yards, grouping 6 shots within a 6-inch circle was considered excellent marksmanship. Not perfect, excellent. At 75 yards, the absolute maximum effective range, you were essentially throwing prayers downrange and hoping physics cooperated. But it gets worse. The rifling in most revolvers twisted left, which meant every bullet drifted approximately 30 inches in the same direction over 300 yards, regardless of shooter skill. You could be the steadiest hand in the West, and your bullet would still curve like it was avoiding your target on purpose. Professional gunfighters understood this. 15 yards was considered the outer limit of reliable combat shooting. Anything beyond that, and you were better off pulling a rifle. Wild Bill Hickok's most famous duel with Davis Tutt happened at 75 yards, a distance so extreme that witnesses were shocked he made the shot. It wasn't skill that made him legendary. It was luck, elevated to mythology by dime novels and desperate editors who needed heroes to sell papers. But if long-range accuracy was a myth, the next technique was pure Hollywood suicide. Number 7. Fanning your revolver was a real combat technique. You hold down the trigger, slap the hammer with your palm in rapid succession. Bang, 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 and watch 5 targets drop in 2 seconds flat. The crowd goes wild. Then a man with a rifle shoots you once, carefully through the heart. Fanning the hammer, that iconic Western move where a gunslinger rapid fires by slapping the hammer repeatedly while holding the trigger, was supposedly the signature move of elite shooters. Fast, deadly, and guaranteed to win any gunfight. Wyatt Earp had 2 words for it: contemptuous suicide. I did not know a really proficient gunfighter who had anything but contempt for the gun fanner, Earp stated flatly. A skilled gun fanner could fire 5 shots so rapidly that the individual reports were indistinguishable, but what could happen to him in a gunfight was pretty close to murder. The mathematics were brutal. Fanning increased your rate of fire but annihilated your accuracy. The violent slapping motion jarred the gun so severely that hitting a man-sized target became nearly impossible. Hitting a barn would have been an achievement. The technique also destroyed the weapon itself. Springs snapped, cylinders mistimed, firing pins bent. Your flashy showmanship often resulted in a broken gun when you needed it most. Real gunfighters understood. The man who took his time and pulled the trigger once, deliberately, would kill the fanner before the 6th wild shot ever left the barrel. 2 documented cases exist of gunfighters trying to fan in actual combat. Jim Courtright fanned against Luke Short and died instantly. Bass Outlaw tried it and met the same fate. Fanning was for Wild West shows and trick shooters. theatrical performance, not survival. But at least those duels actually happened, right? Number 6. Quick draw duels happened at high noon. The sun hangs directly overhead. Two men face each other in the empty street, hands hovering over their holsters. The clock strikes 12. Someone draws. Someone dies. It's cinema's most iconic image. It's also almost completely fictional. The formalized gunfight. Two opponents meeting at an agreed time and place, standing face to face in ritualized combat while the town watches, supposedly defined frontier justice, honor, courage, the ultimate test of speed and nerve. Documented quick-draw duels in the American West number in the single digits, literally. You can count them on one hand and have fingers left over. Real gunfights were chaos incarnate. Multiple shooters, no warning, bullets ricocheting off buildings while bystanders dove for cover. They happened in saloons, back alleys, and from behind cover. They erupted from drunken arguments, heated gambling disputes, and sudden rage. The time of day was irrelevant. The idea of honor was a luxury that got you killed. Wild Bill Hickok's duel with Davis Tutt is one of the rare exceptions. And even that wasn't the choreographed affair Hollywood depicts. They fired simultaneously from 75 yards, both men desperate and terrified. Hickok got lucky. Tutt didn't. Most famous gunfighters built their reputation shooting people from ambush in the back, or when their opponent was unarmed. Wild Bill himself was murdered from behind while playing cards. The myth of the honorable quick draw came from Japanese samurai films, reimagined for Western audiences. Replace swords with 6 shooters, and the 7 samurai becomes the Magnificent 7. It's great storytelling. So the shootouts weren't real, but maybe the guns themselves packed serious power? Time to pull the trigger on that idea. Number 5. Cap and ball revolvers were powerful weapons. You load the percussion revolver carefully, powder ball cap, and feel the weight of frontier justice in your hand. This weapon conquered a continent. This is power incarnate. Then you fire it, and it barely breaks the skin at 60 feet. The cap and ball revolvers that preceded metallic cartridges were supposedly fearsome instruments of death, powerful enough to drop a man or a horse with a single shot. These were the weapons that won the Mexican-American War and armed both sides of the Civil War. Here's what the ballistics actually showed. Cap and ball revolvers fired what was essentially a marble, launched by black powder with an effective range of maybe 50 feet. Maybe. The .36 caliber Navy Colt, Wild Bill Hickok's preferred weapon, could barely penetrate 3 1-inch pine boards at 15 feet. The evidence is darkly comedic. Jesse James carried a .36 caliber ball embedded in his chest for over 15 years. It never slowed him down, never caused significant damage, just lived there, a permanent souvenir of someone's failed attempt at justice. The loading process was nightmarish. Measure powder, ram ball, seat percussion cap, repeat for each chamber. In the rain, the weapon became an expensive club. In combat, Native American warriors could lose 12 arrows in the time it took to reload one cylinder. The cap and ball era represented desperation technology, the best available solution to a problem that wouldn't be truly solved until metallic cartridges arrived. The truth? Every man carrying one knew he was one rainstorm away from being completely, terrifyingly unarmed in hostile territory. As revolvers struggled to impress, a new weapon took the spotlight, one that was supposed to be flawless. Number 4. The Winchester rifle never failed. You work the lever, and another round chambers with that iconic chick-chack sound. This is the gun that won the West. This is perfection in wood and steel. This is, and then, the toggle link action breaks because you tried to fire anything more powerful than a pistol cartridge. The Winchester Model 1873 was supposedly the ultimate frontier weapon. Reliable, accurate, devastating. 15 rounds of thundering power that could drop any target at any range. The rifle so perfect it needed no improvement, so dominant it swept all competition aside. Winchester's iconic lever action wasn't the most accurate rifle of its era. The toggle link action that created created that famous lever throw had a fatal limitation. It couldn't handle high-powered cartridges, while single-shot Sharps rifles were firing 50-90 rounds that could kill buffalo at 1,000 yards. The Winchester was chambered in .44-40, essentially a pistol round pumped into a rifle, adequate for most game, completely outclassed by military cartridges. One Texas Ranger actually had to field strip his Winchester during combat when a wrong-sized cartridge jammed it. He used his knife to remove the side plate, pried out the case, reassembled the weapon, and continued fighting. He survived. His confidence in Winchester engineering didn't. The Winchester succeeded not because it was the best, but because it hit the sweet spot between firepower and speed. In an era where most rifles fired once before reloading, putting 15 rounds downrange in under a minute was revolutionary enough. But even the most famous firearms of the era had one deadly flaw. Sometimes the danger came before you even pulled the trigger. Number 3. Six-shooters were called six-shooters because you loaded all 6 chambers. You load your Colt Peacemaker. 1 round, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now you're carrying a gun that might kill you before it kills your enemy. A six-shooter supposedly held 6 rounds. That's why they called it a six-shooter. Simple mathematics, simple nomenclature. Load every chamber, maximize your firepower, and you're ready for anything. Every experienced frontiersman loaded 5 rounds, always. The 6th chamber stayed empty, aligned under the hammer. Why? Because single-action revolvers had no safety mechanism. None. The hammer rested directly on the firing pin, which rested directly on the primer. Drop your gun, and physics did the rest. The impact drove the firing pin into the primer. The primer ignited, and suddenly you're explaining to the undertaker why there's a bullet-sized hole in your leg, or groin, or foot. The Peacemaker's own loading instructions included a screwdriver because the screws holding the trigger guard and backstrap would vibrate loose from normal horseback riding. Cowboys understood this intimately. The phrase, going off half-cocked, came from the practice of carrying the hammer at half-cock position, theoretically safer than full-cock, but still requiring the 6th chamber to be empty. Modern shooters treat this as ancient history, but it reveals a fundamental truth about frontier life. Your greatest enemy wasn't always the man across the street. Sometimes it was the weapon on your hip, one careless moment away from writing your obituary. The real quick draw wasn't speed, it was surviving long enough to need speed in the first place. But at least the legendary gunfighters were genuinely superhuman, right? Number 2. Wild Bill Hickok could shoot without using his sights. You read the account. Wild Bill Hickok, standing casual as Sunday, put 6 bullets through a 6-inch letter O at 60 yards, without using his sights, without breathing hard, without being human. And that's when you realize it's a lie. A beautiful, profitable, impossible lie. The most famous sharpshooter in frontier history supposedly possessed almost supernatural abilities. Colonel George Ward Nichols documented it in writing. Hickok fired 6 shots from 50 to 60 yards, grouped impossibly tight without ever aligning his sights. Instinct, genius, magic made manifest. Modern ballistics experts and competitive shooters all say the same thing. At 60 yards with a handgun, a clear sight picture isn't just important, it's everything. The difference between a hit and a miss at that range is measured in millimeters of sight alignment. Nobody, not Hickok, not modern Olympic shooters, not anyone, can consistently group shots without using sights. Army testing from 1876 revealed the cold truth. Under controlled conditions with experienced shooters using bench rests, the Colt single-action Army grouped 3.11 inches at 50 yards. That's with perfect technique, no stress, and all day to take the shot. In combat, with adrenaline screaming through your veins and someone shooting back, you'd be lucky to hit center mass. Colonel Nichols needed a story that sold newspapers. Hickok needed a reputation that kept enemies cautious. Together, they created mythology that outlived both of them. The real Wild Bill was dangerous because he remained calm under pressure and pulled the trigger deliberately. But that doesn't sell dime novels. Miracles do. And America bought every impossible word. But the greatest myth of all wasn't about a gun or a gunfighter. It was about the entire era. Number 1. The Wild West was a lawless, ultra-violent place. You imagine the frontier, a blood-soaked hellscape where gunfights erupted hourly, where murder was common as breakfast, where law meant nothing and survival meant everything. And then you see the homicide statistics, and your entire conception of the West collapses. The Wild West was supposedly America's most violent era, an anarchic nightmare of constant gunfights, where the only law was the smoking barrel of a Colt and justice came measured in grains of gunpowder. This is what Hollywood sold us. This is what we bought. Some historians argue the frontier was more civilized, more peaceful, and statistically safer than modern America. The famous cattle town of Dodge City, Hollywood's poster child for Western violence, averaged fewer than 2 homicides per year during its wildest decade. The statistical methodology is revealing. Modern FBI crime metrics can make frontier towns look apocalyptic because of tiny populations. One murder in a town of 200 people creates a homicide rate that looks catastrophic on paper. But in absolute terms, you were statistically safer in 1880s Dodge City than in modern Chicago, Baltimore, or New Orleans. By the 1880s, frontier newspapers were screaming for stricter gun control. Cattle associations banned armed cowboys outright. Even Theodore Roosevelt noted approvingly that his town allowed no shooting in the streets. The myth of the ultra-violent West was manufactured, first by dime novelists who needed exciting stories, then by Buffalo Bill's Wild West show that toured globally, and finally by Hollywood, which discovered that shootouts sold tickets. 11 myths down, and the truth is finally out. If you want more truth over legend stories like this, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video with someone who still believes Hollywood's version of history.